So there has been this huge discussion online about these attacks on the Houthis in Yemen, and said attacks from the United States being leaked to a Signal app chat. Let's say that it's not that secure to be discussing this kind of stuff. And well, the theories that people have range from being an actual leak, accidentally a huge national security, let's say, problem, and the other side being that maybe this was on purpose, that it was planned. Well, we'll be taking a look at Donald Trump's body language and Pete Hegseth's body language, among others, to see if this is what really went on this. And we will also be taking a look at that article from The Atlantic to see if this is another hoax that they are trying to push. Hello and welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of my body language analysis and tips. Let's get down to it. Before we get started with the body language analysis, I want to do a quick recap of the timeline of what brought us here so you can better understand the situation, the circumstances. On March 11, Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, receives a Signal connection request from an account linked to National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. This first step is important because this guy received a connection request. You're going to understand why this is important. 2 days later, Goldberg is added to a Signal group chat labeled Houthi PC Small Group, including senior Trump administration officials like Vice President J.D. Vance, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Between March 13 and March 15, allegedly, the Signal Group discusses U.S. military strike plans against Houthi rebels in Yemen, with Vance expressing reservations about the operation's timing and alignment with Trump's Europe policy. Again, there are screenshots of some of the messages and some allegations in Goldberg's piece for the Atlantic that we're going to dissect. In March 15, at 8:44 a.m. EST, Hegseth sends operational details about the Yemen strike targets, weapons, and sequencing to the Signal Group, inadvertently including Goldberg. And it's like 1 hour afterwards, explosions reported in Sana'a, Yemen, as U.S. airstrikes begin. And post-strike, group members in the Signal group chat exchange celebratory messages. Waltz calls it an amazing job. Rubio congratulates Hegseth, and others use emojis like fists and flags. The same day, in the afternoon, Goldberg removes himself from the chat, notifying the group creator, Mike Waltz, automatically, but receives no follow-up inquiries. In fact, he emails like everybody that was in that group chat, like saying, was this for real? Was I included in this chat? But we're going to be talking about that in a minute. And March 21st, the Department of Defense announces a zero-tolerance policy for leaks, promising aggressive investigations, including polygraphs, following unrelated leak reports. And in March 24, Goldberg publishes his Atlantic article detailing the Signal leak, sparkling widespread attention and criticism. In March 24, that same day, on the afternoon, Trump tells reporters he knows nothing about the leak, distancing himself and criticizing the Atlantic. So we are going to pick up from there right now. We're going to be analyzing the Trump remarks after we take a look at the messages themselves. These are the screenshots shared in the Atlantic piece. I want to say something about these screenshots. It is obvious that if Jeffrey Goldberg was actually in that group, and that group was literally sharing sensitive information, and that sensitive information was in his hands at some point, he must have other screenshots besides this. That is my idea. That's my I presuppose that. So Pete Hegseth, the VP, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's pathetic. They are sharing this information. The screenshots that he shared, that Jeffrey Goldberg shared, it doesn't include anything sensitive. besides J.D. Vance is saying that he hates bailing Europe out again. That is also going to be important later on for our hypothesis in the end. You know, the emojis, excellent, a good start. But I wanted to go to the body language. Let's go to the body language right now. And the first body language analysis is of President Trump. He is at a press conference and he is asked about these leaks. Let's take a look at his reaction and to see if his reaction is genuine. I'm going to play it.
Mr. President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that in our opinion?
Well, first of all, you see that as Trump is listening, this is his usual body language baseline. He is, moving from one side to the other. This is something that he does. He keeps eye contact. He usually does this gesture with his mouth. That is nothing unusual. But let's say I'm going to rewind just a couple seconds and I'm going to ask you to pay attention to the time he takes to answer the question.
Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that in our opinion?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's...
First thing that I noticed is that the answer to the question was very quick, and immediately it goes like sideways to an actually unrelated topic, like The Atlantic itself. So he answers on the spot, very quick, and he immediately like switches his answer to The Atlantic. This is not The Atlantic that we are talking about. That the journalist was very clear about how sensitive is this topic, and it's not The Atlantic itself. So
that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that in our opinion?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
And he asks, you're saying they had what? Like he wants more information? I told you that sometimes playing dumb or not knowing what is going on, it's superpower. And by this point, I think that Trump was using that power.
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
Having to do with what?
Notice that he keeps asking questions as he generally doesn't know. I mean, something of this scope, of this size, there's no way that Donald Trump couldn't know about this. But I'm going to finish the clip so we can discuss this.
Having to do with what? What were they talking?
Having to do with what? Like, elaborate your question.
with the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective.
Notice that he once again is not talking or doesn't want to address if there was a leak or not. Okay, you're talking about the Houthis. Oh yeah, it was a very effective attack. He tries to be very polarizing about two things. One, The Atlantic is, not a very good magazine. They have pushed hoaxes in the past. And the Houthis, the attack on the Houthis went very well. So
I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
You're telling me about this for the first time. He's hearing this for the first time. He has said that a couple times in the past.
And included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that in our opinion?
I don't know anything about it.
I don't know anything about it. I've seen Donald Trump said these words in the past. I don't know anything about this. This is the first time I hear about that. I have the idea, not only for the way that he answered that question, really quick, and not only how quick he answered, but how he deflected the actual matters. The actual matter is the leak itself. And in the first part of his answer, he goes for to bash the Atlantic, and the second part of the answer, when he wants more details, like he plays dumb, he Okay, he says that, okay, that attack was a total success, but he never addresses the leak itself. He says that he doesn't know anything about that. I don't believe him. I'm 100% sure. I have no proof, but no doubts either that Donald Trump knew about what was going on with the quote-unquote leaks, if those were actual leaks and were not on purpose. Remember that we still don't know. In regards to his body language, he makes sure to not... He doesn't display much both in his face or have many illustrator gestures with his hands. He basically doesn't use his hands or his face for anything in
I don't
here.
know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to
You know, zoom in his face.
coordinate on sensitive materials and
Having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
with the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
And then he switches to another journalist. Next question, and that's it. Anybody else? Any other questions? Granted, this is what his body language wanted to conceal, and this is what his words wanted to conceal. I mean, this is part of the politics game, but I'm 100% sure that he knew about what was going on. He just didn't want... I'm going to explain something before we move on to Pete Hegseth. I want to explain something about this. This is a very good way to not have any further questions about the topic. This is the first time I know about this. You're telling me for the first time, so you cannot ask more questions because I don't know anything else about this. This way, you prevent anybody else, this journalist or anybody else, from asking any more questions on the topic, and you can move on to the next question. That is a nice strategy, I could say. And Pete Hegseth. Let's talk about Pete Hegseth. You're talking about that deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist. Let's say his words. He was asked about this arriving in Hawaii. And, well, his reaction, let's say if he confirms or deny about any leaks. Not only pay attention to his body language, but also to what he says.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic? And were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax.
Well, this is true. He has been pushed hoaxes for some time. It's really discredited. But still, Pete Hegseth hasn't confirmed or denied that there was an actual leak, or they had included this guy on that chat, or they were using Signal. I'm gonna jump ahead and say that it has been already confirmed that the group was real, that the group existed. The Houthis PC small group exists. Okay, they were using Signal for this, but let's move on for a second.
Suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning, and you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensive.
Notice that he's basically doing the same as Trump. First, he aims at the Atlantic itself or at Jeffrey Goldberg himself, discrediting him, dismissing the Atlantic as a trustful source. And then he goes on to say that the mission was a success because of the courage of the troops and that everything went great.
Or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Yeah, again, but he is not addressing the actual question. Was there a leak or not? Are you using Signal or not?
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used? And
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans.
This is important. He looks straight into the camera and he says nobody was texting war plans. The thing is, was he being truthful or was he trying to, twist a bit of? That's what I told you earlier on, that one way that Jeffrey Goldberg could easily prove that they were actually, texting war plans on that Signal chat app is that he absolutely must have screenshots of those, if those conversations actually happened on the Signal chat app, because maybe they use Signal to catch up on things but not discuss the high profile. And I think that Scott Jennings has a word or two about that. Maybe we can take a look at that as well. But if they didn't, then it's a nothing burger from the Atlantic. I'm going to just play this clip one more time.
Types of weapons used.
You notice that when the journalist begins to ask about types of weapons used, you see that Hegseth looks away. Maybe he was thinking about his response to this.
Weapons used.
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Right,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it.
Okay, that's it. He goes away. A couple of things that you needed to be aware about the piece itself. Some people are saying, I'm gonna play the Scott Jennings clip. So it's much better. It's much better if you understand this when Scott explains how this works in all cases.
All right, moments ago, Caitlin Collins was reporting on her show, Scott, that there is shock inside the White House that this chat was texted to Jeffrey Goldberg. Are you shocked?
Well, sure. I mean, it's a shocking thing, and they've admitted that it was a mistake and admitted that it's authentic. So
they admitted that it was a mistake, quote unquote, and that it's legit, that it's real. Some people are saying, no, those messages don't look real. Goldberg just made them up. That would be wouldn't that be criminal or something? I don't know. But but the chat was real. I mean, the chat, they already said the chat is legit. Those screenshots shared in the Atlantic are legit.
They're owning up to it. I think they're still, based on what I've heard tonight, trying to figure out how it happened. I'm not sure the National Security Advisor Walls even knows Goldberg. In fact, I don't believe he knows him and has never met him. I did learn a few things in some of my conversations, if you're interested. One is that the Signal program was preloaded on a number of devices and agency computers in the.
Some people are saying that since Signal was already pre-installed in these people's laptops and phones, maybe they already had access to the contacts, but that couldn't explain what we saw previously, and it's in fact featured in the Atlantic piece. On Tuesday, March 11, this is Jeffrey Goldberg, I received a connection request on Signal from a user identified as Michael Waltz. It means that Michael Waltz did not have Jeffrey Goldberg as a contact on his laptop or his mobile phone and added Jeffrey Goldberg. My question is, when in pretty much every single app, you are identified yourself, that pretty much the way, for example, you see that it's, I find it really funny that when you see how Pete Hegseth was identified in Signal, allegedly, or this is, we could say that this is real, they already confirmed that, you see that there's his headshot and that is his full name in there. You can imagine if you are Jeffrey Goldberg, you will have, there's no reason why you wouldn't have your full name and your face so your contacts can know that it's you, right? The editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. So it is my question, it is my genuine question, if Mike Waltz added Jeffrey Goldberg by accident. How can that happen by accident if you're going to see both the name of the contact and the photo of the contact? There's no reason why Jeffrey Goldberg is gonna remain, anonymous without just a JG and no face, no avatar. And even so, if he has a JG, then Michael Waltz would notice that he was adding maybe the wrong person. I wouldn't think that he was adding another person that also had JG as initials. That would be too much of a coincidence. So again, it is too strange that he was added, requested as a connection on March 11, and 2 days later is when Jeffrey Goldberg was added to the Houthi PC small group. I mean, this for me looks pre-planned. Like this was on purpose. This was like to send a message. Like whatever they shared on that Signal app, it was like on purpose to see if Jeffrey Goldberg took the bait. And I think that he took the bait massively. This is another thing. Goldberg, on his piece, he states that some of those messages were said with Waltz said some of the messages in the Signal group to disappear after 1 week and some after 4. I mean, do you think that they're gonna do that on purpose themselves? And in this case, Mike Waltz? Because under the records laws applicable to the White House and federal agencies, all government employees are prohibited from using electronic messaging applications such as Signal for official business, unless those messages are promptly forwarded or copied to an official government account. You cannot have a platform in which messages disappear because you need to keep a record of those communications. That, in fact, reinforces my point that the Signal chat was kind of a decoy. It was not a real chat. That they were making this up for Jeffrey Goldberg to think that he was in the loop in these plans and all this stuff. The thing is Jeffrey Goldberg ready to release the other screenshots of this? Again, the fact that the chat was real, the chat actually exists, doesn't mean that the messages in the chat were the actual plans of the military attacks. You know what I mean? Okay, the chat exists. Some people with these names and these avatars that may or may not be the actual Pete Hegseth, we're having this very clean conversations. By the way, the punctuation and their grammar and how they express themselves, it's so squeaky clean. They have no typos. They have a perfect punctuation. Again, well, I try myself to send messages like this, but this is not normal. Usually you can have a typo here and there. This looks way too clean, way too on the nose, and precisely you wouldn't be using Signal for these communications. And Scott Jennings says another thing that is very interesting. He says that afterwards.
The classified system. So they clearly were knowing there was a line on what you could discuss in a.
Okay, this is
about needing to go to the high side computer.
Yeah, he said this in that same chat. They say we need to go to the high side computers, which is the lingo to say it. We need to go for the actual secure channels. That even more reinforces the fact that they might have added Jeffrey Goldberg to a decoy, a red herring, what we call in literature, to make it seem like he was in this loop. But of course, when they were going to talk about the real stuff, the real heavy stuff, they were going to for the high computers, for the actual let's say classified channels, which of course Jeffrey Goldberg didn't have access to. So the last part that I wanted to share with you is that Brian Hughes, the spokesman for the National Security Council, responded 2 hours later, confirming the veracity of the Signal group. Also, Thanks, Insurrection Barbie. Tulsi Gabbard just confirmed there was no classified information on the Signal chat. They used the high computers for that. So the Signal chat was not an actual official channel. It was, yeah, let's have something to be able to discuss this, let's say, in a general way without details. If Goldberg's claims that there were actual war plans in that chat, well, share the screenshots, share them. The plans, the attacks were already made last week, so maybe you can share those screenshots so you can support your claims, Jeffrey. I don't know. Maybe you can do that, or maybe you don't have them because those never happen. You're pushing for another conspiracy, another hoax. Like Cynical Pluvio says, maybe it's time we rediscover Jeffrey Goldberg's greatest hits of deception, delusion, lies, and all-around grand mal TDS. Like Trump, Americans who died in war are losers and suckers. Losers and suckers. You remember that? Well, it was Jeffrey Goldberg as well. So, between... Oh, well, this is also important. Never listen to anything from The Atlantic ever again. You remember that The Atlantic put out an article claiming a child, was a fake epidemic. And there's a photo of the owner of The Atlantic, Laureen Powell, getting cozy with Ghislaine Maxwell. Oh, well, right. Well, I'm going to wrap up with this, saying that, well, one thing is for certain, Trump 100% knew about what was going on. That is for granted. Pete Hegseth was not worried about what Jeffrey Goldberg saw in that chat. One, because the actual war plans were not shared on that chat. Those screenshots would be all over X and Reddit and Facebook if those existed. That is your proof that they don't exist. The actual war planning that Jeffrey Goldberg claims to have seen, he didn't saw that. Didn't see them. It's as simple as that. Maybe that's the reason why Pete Hegseth spoke directly to the camera and said,
weapons used.
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that.
Right,
Thank you.
That's it.
Nobody was texting war plans. Goldberg, it's your turn. You have those screenshots, then share them with the public. Maybe you are going to get into trouble, but you will be still in trouble because it's your quote-unquote credibility. My take on this is that it is already confirmed that there was no classified information leaked. The actual classified information was not leaked, so that was an exaggeration from The Atlantic. One thing they achieved with this, among many things, not only, add a smoke screen to whatever they are doing, but this is interesting. The kind of things that, like J.D. Vance said, I just hate bailing Europe out again. I mean, this is the kind of messages that you want to put out there without making an official statement. A leaked message about sending a message to Europe. We don't like bailing you out again. There's a message for Europe, and of course, there's also, Pete Hegseth, VP, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading is pathetic. Again, another message for Europe. This is the way that you send a message, in a, let's say in a rather discreet way, but you send a message to Europe either way. I think that Goldberg took the bait. I think this was not an actual leak, but was planned, a controlled leak, if you will. And was in part to make noise, perhaps? I would really want to know what you think about this in the comments. My body language buddies, remember to download my 100 body language tips in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy. Much love and bliss.